So sorry for not being available last time because you know I got Andy to do your class, and how did that go, guys?
Pretty good, Ashiq.
It was good.
Yeah.
Okay,
It was good, yeah.
that was really good. Okay, so did he do the part in terms of business plan?
Ashiq, he said that he actually showed a sample, what do you call it, assignment, and he said he will share it. Can you please check with him?
Yeah, I have it. I have it. So what I'll do is I will share that with Nadisha. I'll email it to you, and you can send it to the rest of the class, right?
Yeah, sure, I can do it.
Okay, so I'll send that in the afternoon. I mean, soon after this, I will send it to you guys, and then you can have a look at that. That's just a model answer from a UK student. So it's not the know all and end all. You will have to take that, understand that, and then sort of devise your answers accordingly. Okay.
Sure.
And then, okay. So in terms of yours, guys, I have started going through a lot of your proposals that you've submitted. I must say some have been really good. In overall, as an average, it's okay. I kind of felt, you know, there were three key areas that I always kept mentioning. First is really the idea, what is your concept? The second piece is the business model, and the third piece being the, you know, financial estimations in summary. Most of the ideas came out good. Felt, you know, some of the explanation or the introduction of your concept or of your business could have been a little better. You know, remember, I kept telling you guys, it's not like you come up front, make a presentation where people can ask questions and then you give clarity based on that. However, when you write a written submission of a proposal, you need to be a little more explicit of what it is and how it works, right? And then map it out in a business model concept, canvas rather. So some of you guys did really well on that, really, really well in terms of showing diagrammatic expressions of how it works, the process flow. So as a person not knowing anything, when you read through, you get an understanding, while some of you could have been a little more explicit on that. On financial, some of you went to the extreme level of great analysis and submission. On the other hand, some were a little too much in summary in terms of saying, okay, this is my capital and this is what it is. But that's okay. I have marked, okay, me being the first marker, I have marked about 15. I told the guys I need time till Wednesday to complete everything. Does anyone want their assessments now over the phone? Or shall we keep it and I'll submit it on Wednesday for all?
Now so that we can start on it.
So I'll tell you, maybe I'll send you guys a list of the guys whom I've completed, and then let's take it from there. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay, guys. So in summary, so getting back to where we are and what our course is for today, just as a recap of what we've been through for the last, this is the 7th week, right? A recap so that you get calibrated in terms of what we're going to do today. If you recall, the first week when we met, we did an introduction into the module, introduction into an understanding what who an entrepreneur is, what is entrepreneurship, types of entrepreneurs, traits of entrepreneurs, motivation of entrepreneurs. We differentiated between intrapreneur and entrepreneur. And we also talked about the importance of entrepreneurship in an economy. So that was kind of the first session. From that, we moved on to the next session by saying that, right, you got a great, and you got all of that doing. But it's important also to make sure that the ecosystem is conducive to bring your idea out. Okay. So when we went into that, guys, we talked about, you know, what the ecosystem is. It could be Pestle, it could be Porter's Five Forces. We needed to understand all of that in terms of making sure that we understand the environment or the ecosystem to bring the idea into the market. With that, we also talked about an opportunity. You know, how do you recognize an opportunity? We said for a startup, there are two main approaches. One is, or rather three, intuitive, methodical, and incremental, right? So identifying the opportunity through observing trends, solving a problem, or identifying a gap in the market. So we talked, so in the second session, it was all about the market, identifying opportunities, and, you know, understanding how that opportunity is based on the trends, solving a problem or a gap in the market. Once we did that, we said, okay, now you know what entrepreneurship is, you know what your idea is, you identify the opportunity, you observe the market. How do you create your business model or structure your business model to serve or to commercialize your opportunity? Okay. We talked about the business model canvas. We talked about innovative business models. We shared certain examples of, for example, the Spotify, Amazon, you know, being innovative and evolving the business model to make sure that you remain relevant in the marketplace. Then week 4, we talked about innovation and creativity. We talked about how innovation is. We talked about the types of innovation. It could be cost, business model, technology, product, etc. The innovation piece of things that you continue to innovate. And on week 5, we talked about feasibility, right? Carrying out a proper feasibility analysis for your business so that when it comes out, you have a better chance of success. I believe last week, from feasibility, you must have gone into business plans, which Andy did last time. Okay. So today we are going to get into entrepreneurial finance, or basically what it's going to be about is all about raising finances for the new business venture. Now, there could be several ways in which we could raise finance. Okay. So today's session, we are going to identify the different forms and sources of finance at different stages of an enterprise. You know, in a product, I'm sure all of you guys have done product life cycle. There's an introduction, growth, maturity, decline. Likewise, in a business as well, we capture the different stages of business and understand at the different stages, what sort of finance do we want? Okay, so we're going to understand that. We are going to review or analyze the different finance options that are available in the marketplace. And finally, we are going to look at bootstrapping and other indirect forms of finance to be used by nascent entrepreneurs, that is budding entrepreneurs, right, or emerging entrepreneurs. So those are the key 3 areas that we will be looking at as we go on today. Okay. Is everybody clear of where we are headed in terms of today's session? Just 1 or 2 yes, say yes or no, so that we can move on.
Yes.
Okay, right. So as we move on, guys, it's about, today we're going to really focus on, okay, how much money do you believe you will need, right? In layman's terms, I'm going to start up. I've done my feasibility. Now I know how much money I need. And at what points in time would I need this money? If you analyze in a 3-year period, at different stages, you will require funding for growth, for introduction, at a maturity stage, new product innovation. What are those you will need? What options of finance do you have? Okay, I have say, for example, with me, I have savings. Is that enough? Or do I go to a bank and borrow money? Or do I go to a friend and borrow money? So what options do I have? And how would you select between the different options that you have? How would you select from, do I go to a bank and borrow? Do I do a hire purchase or lease? Do I go to a friend and borrow? Do I do crowdfunding? So you have to choose. So in summary, after you've done your feasibility and your business plan, you determine, okay, the requirement of capital, the requirement of working capital, and what are the expenses you need. Then you determine how much do I need? What are the sources of funds that are available out there that I can get this money? And finally, you need to then decide which sources do I accept or go to, or which sources do I let go of. That's what we're going to do. So moving on from there, guys, if you think of modes of finance, okay, there are two broad modes in which you can finance an enterprise or a business. You can finance it through debt, or you can finance it through equity. So financial modes can be broadly divided into two. Debt is borrowing. Debt means, in simple terms, borrowing money. Equity means putting money of your own, or getting people to be a part of the business and putting in money. That's equity. Okay, so you have either to choose from debt and equity. Debt will have several options in debt. Equity also will have several options, and we are going to look at some of them today. And then at different times in the evolution of a business, there will be requirements of funding. At a startup stage, when it's growth, and when it's maturity. So what we are trying to do is understand which mode of finance, either or both, at which stage of the business are you going to use them? All right. So whether I'm going to use at a startup stage, am I going to use debt, or am I going to use equity, or am I going to use a mixture of the both? Likewise, in the different stages, we will decide what we're going to do. Okay. Moving on from there. Now, whilst we have three basic or broad stages saying startup, growth, and maturity in terms of a business, leaving decline out of it, where you sell out maybe or not, there is also which is an early stage. Okay, so when we look at a business, when you've done your feasibility and business plan, you obviously will have a startup stage and early stage. Startup means the first 3-6 months, and early stage means the first 9 months. Growth means the first 18 months, and maturity means after that point. What are the financial requirements that you would want at a startup stage, and how could you fund it? How could you fund it? So at a startup stage, you can always borrow. Banks or the financial institutions that you can go to, and you could probably borrow funds, right? Now here, you could also bring in your equity funding through family or friends. You put in your own capital, or you have informal investors who believe in your idea and say, okay, I'll put 5%, I'll put 10%, etc. At an early stage, okay, once you've started up your business, now you need funding, you can go to a venture capitalist. Now, I'm not going to explain venture capitalist here because we will look at it a little later on. Venture capitalist, and you could even go and borrow. From that stage, when you go on, if you all understand financials, you might, from the profits that you make, you retain some of it in the business. You can put that back into the business, borrow, and go through the growth stage. In the maturity stage, assuming you can go public, you can go into the stock market and raise funds by an IPO or public offering, or you get institutional investors to come and invest in your business. So these are the stages which you will go through in your business. And as you go through in your business, how would you fund your business to continue, or to continue to be relevant? So those are the stages that we've identified in our course material that we'll need to realize in our business plan and in our businesses, or in all the business proposals that you come up with. How do we make it work? Okay. Any questions so far, guys? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Any questions, Nadish, Ishan, anyone else? I see your names popping up. Anyone else? Anything required? Nope. Okay.
I think we can move forward.
Okay. Let's move forward. Moving on from there, guys, is now let's look at the sources of financing. So broad, if you recall, okay, the first slide we talked about, there are two broad sources of funding, either debt funding or either equity funding. Okay. This can come through internal or external sources. Now, if you look at internal sources, right, what we are talking about is funding it yourself or funding it through people that you know. Now, internal sources in broad strokes is talking about personal funding, right? In broad strokes, it's all about personal funding. That means how much money do I have, or how much funds do I have, or how much assets do I have, or through my family and friends that I can put it into the business to make it to start up. All right. So that is through internal sources. That is, you can in your own funding. It could be an inheritance that you have. It could be the savings that you have. It could be personal insurance that you have, or you go to family and friends and get them also to be a part of the business venture. Externally, you could now internally, generally it is equity funding. Generally, okay, generally internal sources are equity funding. External could be both. It could be either debt, it could be equity. So for example, if you take external sources of equity, it could be through a private placement. A private placement means you identify certain investors and go and pitch your business proposal and see whether you can fund. Or it could be business angels, or it could be through crowdfunding. So those are the external equity sources. External debt sources could be mortgage, hire purchase, bank loans, microfinancing. Any of those could be external sources which you could use to set up your business. It might be good, guys, if you just take down, some of the sources that I'm mentioning. So equities, private placements, venture capitalists, institutional investors, crowdfunding, right? External debt sources could be bank borrowings, hire purchase and leasing, mortgages, microfinancings, etc. And finally, externally, other sources could be grants that you can get from governments, which we'll again look at during the course. So that is the framework overall in terms of the sources of finances, internal or external, debt or equity, and the different modes. So now let's move on to really understanding what these sources of finances are. So repeating broad strokes, two sources, debt financing, equity financing. Debt financing is a money that has to be repaid at a later date. Debt financing, there is a commitment to repay. In equity financing, funds are invested in exchange for ownership in the company, right? You put 100% of it, you own 100%. You give 10% to somebody else, then you own 90 and somebody has 10%. Okay. So in debt financing, you can do bank finances, hire purchase and leasing, or government lending schemes, whichever. Right? There could be so many others, but the main ones that we are going to look at is bank financing, hire purchase and leasing, and any government lending schemes. Equity financing, either you put your own money, which we talked about all this time. You can go to a venture capitalist, venture capital firms such as Google Ventures, business angels such as, for example, like crowdfunding, where you use such as Kickstarter to fund your businesses. Any questions, guys? Yeah, go ahead.
How about when it comes to other options like venture debt and convertible notes and everything? Those come under debts, right?
Yeah, those come under debts. So those are option schemes, no? So you can get onto an option scheme where you fund it through debt and you can convert it at a later date. It starts out as debt financing.
Right.
Okay. Anyone else, guys, at this point?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay.
Dishan, go ahead, Dishan. Go ahead.
Okay. Ashiq, so basically sometimes under situations where essentially your equity financing method, depending on the agreement you have with your investor or whatever, can also be kind of like a hybrid of a equity financing, debt financing model.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just going to go back so that you get that understanding. See, when we say at the startup stage, you could, I'll just put banks here. This could be borrowings, right? It could be any sort of debt that you bring, and with your own investment, create that fund. So it could be, it's not one or, it could be one, it could be both together in proportions. Any other questions?
One thing actually related to the assignment now on the task one, we actually like briefly touched upon this financing.
Yes.
Can we change that in the second task? Now, for an example, if I said, okay, we are going with the investor.
Yes.
The second one, can we go with equity or something like that? Can we completely change it?
Yes, you can. Absolutely, yes. So just taking 1 second. So your first part of your assignment only required an indication of the required capital and the way you're going to use it. Your total assignment, you have to now really think about how am I going to finance it? Okay. It could be where you're partnering with somebody and you're bringing in, or you'll decide to bring in loans or anything. So you can change the whole thing. There is no issue on that.
All right. Thanks.
Ashiq, just a small question. Debt financing and equity financing, the biggest difference is actually the ownership of the company. Is it only that? How do you want to define it?
Okay, let's not confuse. Ownership of a company is based on the equity funding, general broad terms, right? General broad terms, meaning I, with 3 of my friends, get together and we say, we are going to start this company, and each of us, or let's say 4 of us, 25% each, we are going to start a company. We go and borrow from the bank. The bank has no control over our operations whatsoever. We decide what we are going to do. Debt financing, you have to pay that money back at a later date. And the return on debt to a bank or hire purchase is interest. The return on equity is dividend or capital appreciation. We'll get to that later. So debt financing generally does not have any ownership in the company. It's the obligation of the shareholders of the company to repay the debt with interest.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Ashiq, one more question.
Yeah.
How the venture capitalist will differ from the business angels?
Okay. Matan, I'm going to touch on that a little later.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so the different debt financing modes, bank finance, hire purchase, and government lending schemes, equity finance, your own capital, or venture capital, business angels, crowdfunding, will cover all of these 6 methods today.
Okay.
All right. So keep in mind, debt financing, money has to be repaid at a later date in equal installments or whichever way. And the return that the person who gives you the debt wants interest. Equity, imagine us, you know, 4 of us starting a business. What do we want? We want dividends. We want profits in return, or we want capital appreciation. Is everybody clear of the return on debt and the return on equity? And understand what debt and equity is. You really need to understand that to go forward. Any other questions? Okay, let's move. Let's look at the key or main methods of debt financing. This means that the owners or the shareholders or the sole owner goes and borrows money to finance the running of the business. When you borrow money like that, you have an obligation to pay interest on the money that you borrowed and to repay the capital or to repay the money that you borrowed. For example, if you're borrowing 100,000 rupees at 10% interest, you have to pay 10% interest in equal installments for the period of the life of that fund. And you have to make that capital repayment as well. Okay. So nothing remains in the business. You're borrowing and you're returning. That's debt financing. The first and known and most understood method of debt financing is borrowing money from a bank, right? You go and borrow money from a bank. This could be in terms of 3 broad areas. You take a loan from a bank, you take an overdraft from a bank, or use the credit cards to, you know, to whatever level that your credit limits are to fund the business. So bank loans could be short or long term, right? It may be secured or it may be unsecured. Okay, meaning to say, in a bank, when you go to borrow, the bank would assess your credit worthiness. What does that mean? Any financial institution who you go to borrow will assess your credit worthiness, ability to repay the money. That is the first thing any bank would do. And that you would realize, guys, if you all have borrowed any funds, be it a personal loan, home loan, vehicle loan, or anything, they will assess what is your salary, right? What are the assets do you have? Okay. The period of time that you want it for also, they will assess based on the value of the loan that you want. So that's a loan. Now, the second part of it is an overdraft. You may have a facility in a bank and you may tell the bank, look, I want to overdraw by a particular limit. That is also allowed, or you can do that, or you could use your credit card to borrow funds. When you do this, there are 3 main things that the bank would look at. I told this already. Your credit worthiness or ability to repay, and the collateral. Sometimes they would want an asset as a collateral. They say, you say, I want $1 million. They'll say, fine, I can give you $1 million. What assets do you have? And if you are unable to pay, that they will hold the asset as collateral. All right. So what are the advantages of bank financing? Going to a bank and borrowing has certain advantages, because, you know, banks compete. Banks, guys, as you know, banks' income is really through investment or giving loans. They give loans. So you can get competitive rates because there is so much of competition amongst the banks to lure people to borrow from them so that they get a return as interest, right? So there is a good opportunity. If you have a good proposal, when you take it to the bank, you can even negotiate on rates. That's the first advantage of bank borrowing. Second one is specialist advice, because these relationship managers or the banks have given money to so many people as loans, they will be able to even advise you on, you know, what to do, what not to do, how much do you need, how much loan should you take, etc. And they have many branches, right? They have many branches in terms of, you know, be it you're in Colombo or Kandy, you will have branches in the UK or US. You can even borrow internationally. So there is so much of opportunity where banks are concerned in terms of competitive rates, specialist advice that they can give, and the many or the networking of banks that are there, that you can have that advantage by going to a bank to borrow. Furthermore, one of the key things is when you go into borrowing, they might require security. So you'll have to give some sort of an asset. And what do you mean by it does not provide risk capital? Meaning they won't give you anything for nothing. Okay. Now, when you put your own money, you have a risk of losing it. The banks do not give you that. They will give you money on the guarantee that you will repay through a security. So that's what bank finances is. And the bank will consider what is your idea, what is your business venture, what is your business plan. You as an individual, have you been into a crib? Do you have a criminal record? All of that stuff. And do you have the ability to repay the loan? So that's about bank financing. Any questions so far, guys, on bank financing? Going to a bank to borrow. No? Okay, so I'm moving on. So this is just a grid to get you an understanding of the bank decision-making process. When a bank has to decide whether I'm going to lend or not going to lend, right? And they will look at, okay, if the business fails or if the business succeeds on the two quadrants. On vertical quadrant is lending. This is from a bank's perspective, okay? This is completely from a bank's perspective. So if you say the bank decides to lend and the business succeeds, both win. The borrower and the bank both win. All right. If the bank lends and the business fails, both lose. So the bank has to really, you know, analyze and see at which business ventures to whom should I lend and whom should I not kind of lend. It's a bit of a gamble also, guys, you know. So the bank manager wants B but needs to avoid A. B is bank manager lends and the business succeeds, both win. That's what ultimately they want. But we always try to avoid the business failing or take a decision. If he thinks that, this business does not look good and does not lend, then he wins. Moving on from there. Okay, so that's about bank funding. So the second mode of debt financing is hire purchase and leasing. Okay, just a yes or no, everybody understood bank financing and the decision-making process and what the banks would look at?
Yes.
All right, okay. So let's go to hire purchase and leasing now. I've given you how to compare hire purchase and leasing and the meaning of both, right? Now, based on your venture, again, you could decide debt financing, part of it I want through a bank, part I want through hire purchase, and part I want to lease, and part I'm going to put my own finances as well. Okay, could be multiples of all of this. It does not mean one or the other. It could be a mix of debt financing and a mix of equity financing as well. So second mode here is hire purchase. Let's first look at hire purchase. What does hire purchase mean? We are saying here the deal in which one party can use the asset of the other party for the payment of equal monthly installments is known as hire purchase. I'll tell you another definition if you won't take it down. The finance house will own the asset until the final payment is made by the business. Hire purchase is that the finance house will own the asset until the final payment is made by the business. So for example, you go and get a car on hire purchase. So the hire purchase company or the lender will own that asset until you repay everything. Until you repay everything, then only you will own your asset. Okay, so that is hire purchase. Everyone clear on hire purchase, guys?
Yes.
Okay, so generally hire purchase is used for let's say for when you want to get a vehicle or something like that is what you use hire purchase for. Leasing is an agreement where one party buys the asset and allows the other party to use it. It's like a house. You take a house on lease, somebody else owns it, you will never own it. In hire purchase, at the end of the term, you can end up owning the asset. In leasing, you will not own the asset. Is that clear? So the finance house buys the asset and leases it to the borrower, and the borrower pays a rental or a lease payment either equally or in bulk or whatever based on the agreement during the period that you want it. Is that clear?
Yes, clear.
All right, so hire purchase and leasing. So if you want, guys, a summary in terms of another definition for hire purchase is the finance house owns the asset until the final payment is made by the business, whilst leasing is the finance house buys the asset and leases it or allows the use to the borrower. Okay. Let's just look at this video so that you get an understanding.
Ashiq, we can't hear the video. Anything on the video?
Sorry, somebody said something?
We can't hear anything on the video.
Oh, you can't hear anything on the video. Okay, now how do I solve that?
Thinking of buying a new vehicle? Wondering how to finance it? One option is hire purchase, often referred to.
Yeah.
Hire purchase is probably the simplest form of vehicle finance. It allows for monthly payments to be made for a set period, at the end of which you will own the vehicle. Although it's important to remember that, like a mortgage, the vehicle won't technically be owned until all the payments have been made, including the option to purchase fee. Hire purchase plans begin with a deposit. This can be from as little as a few pounds, although 10% of the cost of the vehicle is the most common. The rest of the cost of the vehicle, plus interest, is paid in equal monthly payments. The payments can be split over a period to suit you, known as the finance term. Usually, this is anything from 1 to 5 years. After the final payment is made, the vehicle is yours.
Okay, so I'm assuming I've uploaded all of this guys on Moodle, even the videos, so that you all can have a look. I hope that gives you a reasonably good understanding of what hire purchase is. Okay, moving from there. So we learned what debt financing, what the broad concept of what debt financing means, right? It means essentially borrowing with a responsibility to repay with interest. It could be through banks, it could be through hire purchase or leasing. And the third element, and somebody, you know, of you guys can enlighten me on a Sri Lankan perspective, but in the UK, apparently there is this enterprise finance guarantee scheme, which is a government scheme that facilitates lending to certain businesses. Okay, so it is generally it's a guarantee scheme where businesses which have been turned down by lending houses can go to them for financing. Okay, so it says here businesses that have been turned down for a loan or other form of debt finance due to inadequate security or proven track record. In that perspective, the government will evaluate and provide funds. So what happens here, the most important thing is, guys, this is when you have been turned down by a financial institution. If you have been turned down by the financial institution, only you can go to the government and ask for this scheme. If you have got a loan from the government, then you will not be able to get a loan from this. Okay, so it's only the unsuccessful applicants of commercial borrowing are eligible to borrow from or to go for this scheme from the government. Right? Is that clear?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. Anyone knows of any scheme in Sri Lanka that the government has on these other than microfinancing? Any idea? Any bankers who know of this? I had a lot of bankers. Anything where the government provides startup capital if you're turned down by the bank? No? Okay. So maybe it's not available. I'll do some checking myself and see if there is any opportunity where the Sri Lankan government also has some sort of a facility of providing for businesses that are coming up. Okay, so that's the three methods of debt financing that we can look at. Okay, so debt financing, we talked hire purchase and leasing, we talked about bank financing, and we talked about government lending schemes. Now we are moving on to equity financing. So if you are not borrowing and you're putting in money for a stake in the company, that is equity financing. Okay, repeating, equity financing is the money, I'm using the term money in broad strokes, right? Asset or whatever that you put in for a share of the company. That is equity financing. Debt financing generally does not have a stake in the company. Equity financing necessarily does have a stake in the company. The return for equity financing is either dividend or capital appreciation, right? So for example, you start your business today and down the line, say 4 partners, the dividend that you get or the profit share that you get, that's what you want. Or when you sell off the business, how much more you get, or when you sell your shares, how much more you get is capital appreciation. Okay, so return on equity financing is twofold, either dividends or capital appreciation. So equity financing, either you put your own money or you sell a stake or sell a percentage of your business to a venture capitalist or to an angel investor. And we'll cover these two under equity financing, right? So you sell a stake of your business, a part of it. Ownership is given to somebody else. It could be, that person could be an active investor or it could be a silent investor. Certain people think, okay, this is a good venture, it's going to happen, I'll put some money into it and let's see how it works out, and does not get involved in the business at all, a silent investor. Or it could be a person who says, okay, I want 20% stake, I want to be a director in the company, and I want to be in the board of the company. Those investors could be active investors as well. So the funder, based on what he wants, could be a person who will be involved in the running of the business, or will be silent, who just wants the return for the money. He takes the risk though. Now, we learned in debt financing, the debt house or the lending house takes no responsibility. Here, or rather the investor, or rather the founder, you have to pay that. Here, if you have a venture capitalist puts money, he takes the risk that he may not get it back. All right, so that is equity financing. Everyone understands the concept of equity financing? Yes.
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 All right.
Yes.
Okay. So the modes of equity financing, you put your own funds, or you go to a venture capital. So what is a venture capitalist? I'm just going to read this to you. A venture capital is a form of private equity financing, right? Venture capital is always equity financing in principle, that is provided by a venture capital firms to startups, early stage and emerging companies that have been deemed to have high growth potential, or which demonstrate high growth in terms of employees, annual revenue, etc. Venture capital firms or fund invests, or firms or funds invest in these early stage companies in exchange for equity or an ownership stake in those companies. Those are venture capital firms. Okay. So these firms, so you go and pitch your idea to a venture, such as, venture capital firm could be a company like Google Ventures. They're a venture capital firm. You go and pitch your idea. They'll say, okay, I like your idea. They look at everything and say, I want a stake in this company. And generally what they do is that once the business really grows and stuff like that, they expect their return in terms of exit. That's a venture capitalist. He takes on a stake, the company goes and he sells his stake and he makes his money and then goes and invests it somewhere else. That's how a venture capital firm works. So the venture capitalist looks at these factors in deciding whether to invest in this firm or not, right? The venture capital firms such as Google Ventures will look at, now like we said, the bank would look at your credit worthiness, your ability to repay, the asset that you have. A venture capitalist now does not get collateral. Now. He does not get collateral. For the money he puts in, he needs to think about, okay, how secure is my money? How secure is this business plan that it has a good chance that it's going to be successful? So the venture capital firm would look at size and sector. Okay, they are going into a blue ocean, or is it a red ocean? Or is there a lot of demand in this sector? The opportunity that I can recover my investment, right? At a sellout, I can get this. Looks at the company management. Have they got the right people? Who is their CEO? Who is the marketing guy? Is the product right, etc.? What is the competitive advantage, in the business model, etc.? What is that competitive advantage that is there that gives a good chance that this company is going to be successful? And what is that financial projection or that business plan that details out what this return is going to be? So a venture capital firm would look at these factors when deciding whether to put the money, how much of a stake and that they would want by putting that funding. So these are the factors that the venture capital would look at. So when you're doing your detailed assignment, guys, you must think, okay, if I'm going to a venture capitalist, because I don't want to go to a bank, I don't want to debt finance because the burden of paying that interest is too much on me. I would like to go to a venture capitalist. If you're going to do that, these are the things that a venture capitalist would look at, and your plan should be convincing to a venture capitalist to induce them to fund into your business. So there are type of venture capitals. It could be institutional, informal, corporate, or public sector. Okay. So for example, if we take institutional venture capitalists, these are investment by full-time professionals who raise money from financial institutions. They raise money and put money in. They raise money and put money in. Any examples that you can think of? A venture capitalist?
Ajit Gunawardana's Bluestone
That's
Capital.
right. Absolutely. Yes. So they are a venture capital. He is the man who does it. Or even for example, even a Dhammika Pereira could be considered. I think they have valuable finance and stuff like that. So these guys just get money and put, right? So Ajit Gunawardana or Dhammika Pereiras, they are venture capitalists. The informal venture capital or business angels, these are private wealthy individuals. Somebody asked me, what's the difference between a venture capital and a business angel, right? So business angels are wealthy people who have a lot of money and they just put it. This is individuals. For example, in Shark Tank, you know, those guys who sit there like the Mark Cubans, they are business angels. They are high net worth individuals who will, based on the idea and stuff, put their money into that. Okay. The next is corporate venture capitals. These guys, you know, so I'll give you an example on this. You know, Pick Me in Sri Lanka, right? They are still a private company. They have never gone public. Ajit Gunawardana, through his Bluestone, has invested into it. Likewise, certain companies, in terms of diversifying their risk and stuff like that, put some money into ventures like this. These are corporate venture capitals or small time. For example, in Pick Me, the Hydra Money Group in Sri Lanka and MAS also have small stakes, putting some money in this. So you have or public sector, you know, social welfare, maybe using certain money to invest in companies or startups. These are the type of venture capital opportunities that are available. Okay.
I feel like there's never been a more important time to have a voice and to know that it's going to be heard. You know, you guys can do the impossible. Just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean it shouldn't. No,
So that was Google Ventures. They're a venture capital firm. You must have realized, Zipline to Uber, they had invested in all of those firms, and when they grew, they have sold their stake out. Okay, so these are the opportunities from venture capitalists. Any questions, guys? Nope. Can I move on? Any questions, or shall I move on?
All good.
All good. Okay. So now we're on equity financing. The first form of equity financing, which is not explained here, is your own funds, personal funding. You put money by yourself, you agree on a stake that you want, then you take and go to a venture capitalist, or you go to a second party's business angels. These are private, high net worth individuals who make direct investments in unquoted companies in which they have no family connections, right? As we said, Mark Cuban, etc. They just go in there. Now, the difference between a business angel and a venture capitalist generally is that these individuals sometimes get involved in the business. They want some way of getting involved, or you go and approach these guys because having them on your company will help you boost the sales of your company, or help you boost the networking of your company, or something like that. So it says there, far more involved than institutional venture capitalists, right? Now, Google Ventures might put money into a particular startup, and they might be a silent investor. They take a 15% stake or a 5% stake or a 10% stake, and they might stay silent. Whilst these individuals, I'm using Shark Tank because that's something that I played with you guys, is that you take one of them, such as a Mark Cuban, he will put in the money, and he will be involved in the operation in some form, saying that, okay, I'm going to take 10% stake for so much of money, but I will, connect you with the retail outlets where you can go and, sell your product, etc. These guys get a little more involved in the running of the business. That's business angels. Is that okay? Understood the difference between business angels and venture capitalists then?
Yeah, clear.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. The next one that we are going into in terms of equity funding is called crowdfunding. And I think I had a chat with Andy, and he kind of told me that, he just touched upon this, even though it was not really a part of the last times. I don't know if he played this particular video. I'm going to just play this video so that you get an understanding before we get into what crowdfunding is all about.
In the past, shipping a product or launching a company was only an option for those who had the money, or for those who could attract an investment from venture capitalists. Crowdfunding websites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo have drawn a lot of attention from entrepreneurs, policymakers, investors, and the public. Their enthusiasm is understandable. Today, these internet marketplaces connect people seeking funds with hundreds, if not thousands, of supporters. But the idea that an entrepreneur could raise funds from a large number of sources, each providing just a small amount, isn't really new. In 1985, Paul Hogan and John Cornell tapped 1,400 Australian investors to produce the blockbuster movie Crocodile Dundee. In the 1970s and 80s, limited partnerships, which required minimum investments of no more than $2,000, became a popular form of financing everything from shopping malls to oil and gas exploration. And charities, of course, have long relied on funding drives that aggregate thousands of small donations. What is new is the emergence of powerful internet platforms that enable funding campaigns. These crowdfunding platforms lower the costs of running a campaign by leveraging the geographic and social reach of the internet to connect fundraisers with millions of potential backers. In exchange, these platforms charge a fee, typically a percentage of the amount raised. There are 4 major crowdfunding models. It's easiest to classify them according to what they offer in exchange for the funds they receive, either equity, debt, some type of a reward, or nothing but the satisfaction of donating to a good cause. Equity-based sites such as AngelList and CircleUp provide a platform where people can sell shares of their company. This type of funding only represents a small fraction of all crowdfunding activity. Legal and practical constraints have slowed things down, but upcoming regulatory changes could make a big difference. Today, peer-to-peer lending sites like Lending Club offer a crowdsourced solution for debt. It's part of a larger revolution in financial tech, internet software that aims to disrupt the traditional finance industry. While banks typically serve as an intermediary for loans, the peer-to-peer model allows one person, or many, to lend money directly to those who need it. This allows savers to earn more and borrowers to pay less. Rewards-based sites are one of the major innovations in crowdfunding. Funders back campaigns that interest them with the promise of receiving something in return, usually a copy of whatever project they're backing. Kickstarter is the most well-known example of this model and has been used to fund everything from the creation of albums and short films to the development of 3D printers and smartwatches. Finally, there are charity platforms like Causes or CrowdRise. Fundraisers usually do not offer anything in return for donations, except for the information and feedback about the good deeds that those campaigns have enabled. Crowdfunding has been growing at a steady rate worldwide, opening up new opportunities for both entrepreneurs and investors. Crowdfunding has already demonstrated the ability to promote innovation, wealth creation, and more. But of course, it has also revealed certain potential shortcomings.
I hope that, was this video played last time?
No.
Okay. Okay. So I hope you've gotten an understanding of what crowdfunding is, right? Basically, it's a way of raising money or finances by asking a large number of people for small amounts, right? Generally, crowdfunding platforms, it's internet based generally. Now here, guys, I want you to understand this very clearly. Crowdfunding does not necessarily all the time be equity. Okay, sometimes crowdfunding can be through debt as well, meaning, okay, let me try and explain this properly. So crowdfunding in summary is trying to get small amounts of money from a lot of people to finance whatever activity that you need in your startup or your company. This could be equity. Let's first look at equity. That is, the people who are giving money, right? They get a small stake in the company. They become a shareholder in some form or way. It's like you want ₹1 million and you're getting, 100,000 people giving 10,000 each. Something like that. It may be a 0.1% stake in the company. So they get a share of the company. That is equity-based crowdfunding. Allows the people invest. Equity crowdfunding, people invest in exchange for equity or a percentage stake in the company. They get shares in the company, right? That is equity crowdfunding. Debt crowdfunding, on the other hand, is with the commitment by the startup to repay with interest. Investors receive their money back with interest. That's something where debt crowdfunding does. So here in debt crowdfunding, there is no stake given in the company, but a commitment to repay. Donations are, of course, these are social, for certain social activities, people do crowdfunding, right? This is not a stake in a company or anything of like that. In the broad scheme of crowdfunding, for a business, it's debt or equity. Donations are for more social activities where you collect money for a social reason and give that out. Okay. Do you all have this? Do you all get this broad understanding of crowdfunding? Any questions, guys, on crowdfunding? Please do ask if you feel that you're not clear. Okay, so I'm assuming it's clear. Crowdfunding in summary, is you get a lot of people to put a little money and you get that money, right? This could be, this money that you take could be equity where people want a share in the company and then there is no obligation to repay. Whilst it could be also debt crowdfunding. There are a lot of people to put little money, but then there is an obligation to repay it with interest. That is debt crowdfunding. Donations are more from a social perspective, to put money into some project that has a social benefit. That's crowdfunding.
Eating well makes you feel great, but it's not always easy, especially at lunchtime. That's why we created the Prep Pack, a revolutionary new take on the humble lunchbox, intelligently designed and beautifully crafted to make lunchtime more enjoyable. But Prep Pack is more than just a lunchbox. It's a new way of taking control of what you eat. We've created an innovative system of modular containers that can be arranged in different combinations to suit your changing daily needs. And there's an app designed alongside the Prep Pack that allows you to browse tasty meal plans, simply select one to make for the week ahead, output customized shopping lists, and follow recipes designed to fit the Prep Pack containers perfectly. Buying multiple containers allows you to batch cook in one sitting, saving you time during the week and ensuring you always have food prepared in advance. Grab your food for the day, put it in your pack, and you're ready to go. You'll have everything you need to create and enjoy delicious, Instagram-worthy lunches every day.
Prep Pack makes taking lunch to work better in every way. Compared to current storage options, which are often cheaply made and prone to leaking, the Prep Pack containers are a premium upgrade. Made from a breakthrough BPA-free material called Tritan, the boxes are dishwasher-friendly and safe to freeze and microwave, so they're perfect for both storing leftovers and your freshly prepped meals. The containers are also completely leak-proof, so you can feel confident taking your lunch to work. With the Prepped app, we've done the hard work, so you don't have to. We teamed up with chefs, nutritionists and foodies to design a vast range of prep-friendly meal plans and exciting recipes. You can search by a specific diet type, health goal, or key ingredient, so you can find exactly the right meal plan for you. The app also automatically measures what you eat, giving you a more complete picture of your diet. But most importantly, Prep Pack delivers an unrivaled eating experience, from the integrated silicon eating mat to the smart magnetic cutlery. We've thought of every detail to ensure you'll always look forward to lunchtime.
We believe that Prep Pack can help you take back control of your lunch, be smarter, and live a healthier lifestyle.
We've worked incredibly hard to bring Prep Pack to life, but now we need your help to take the final step and get this fantastic new product into your hands.
So please back us and kickstart your healthier lifestyle today.
So those guys actually raised funds out of Kickstarter, and this is how they sort of pitch their idea. And this is the publicity that you get when you go for crowdfunding. When you pitch such an idea, people look at it and, you know, see, they get a motivation to invest, right? So this is how they launched it on. This is how they published it or put it on Kickstarter. All right. So that is one example, and there are so many other examples. If you kind of go to YouTube and see how people pitch their ideas on Kickstarter to get crowdfunding, either debt crowdfunding or equity crowdfunding. Okay, so that's on crowdfunding. Assuming there is no questions or clarifications, we're going to move on. There are a lot of crowdfunding platforms, guys. I mean, you can check it up. It's like Indiegogo and Kickstarter, GoFundMe, Microventure, Circle Up, Lending Club. There are a lot of platforms of crowdfunding that are available. Okay, let's go into the last part, which is known as bootstrapping. Okay, now I'm going to play you a video, guys, on bootstrapping. I just want you to know that the language is not very audible the way this guy speaks, but try and pay attention because it gives you a good overview before I kind of explain it to you of what bootstrapping is.
You're looking at the term bootstrap. Does this conjure up images of on stubby territories, fighting with the leases, and stomping over? Well, freeze.
Ashiq, will it be possible to increase the volume a little bit on that?
We're looking at the term bootstrapping. Does this conjure up images of pulling on a sturdy pair of boots, fighting with the laces, and stomping over everything in your path? The phrase, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, was first used in the 19th century to mean achieving the impossible. It later evolved to become a metaphor for achieving something yourself with no outside assistance. In business, its meaning goes along the same sort of lines. A bootstrapped company might get off the ground is to take orders and use the cash from those first sales to make and deliver the product. This business model has its advantages and disadvantages. On the one hand, all the risk is placed on the founder. They are 100% responsible for the success or failure of the company. If resources are limited, growth can be impacted and may affect the quality of the product. On the other hand, sure, the risk is placed on the founder, but if the business is successful, the rewards will be the founders. With no other investors to answer to, the entrepreneur is fully in charge of decisions and has control over the company and its direction. They are focused on running the business and dealing with orders. They don't have to worry about pitching for investment. Let's go back to the Stone Age and see how my pal, Rab the Rockstar, is doing. He's featured every Speak Like Chef I've done, and he's fantastic at helping explain to you what all these terms mean. Rab launched the original bootstrap company. When he came up with the idea of making and selling tools to help hunters catch more prey, he didn't go around his fellow cavemen and ask for their help. Nope, he did it all himself, and that meant he was in charge of his own destiny. As a side note, as well as being the first bootstrapper, Rab could very easily have been the first solopreneur in human history. He realised he preferred spending his day networking and meeting his customers, rather than being content simply doing the work, but that's for a future video. A recent example of a bootstrapped company is Spanx. Sarah Blakely founded the underwear company in 2000 with just $5,000 of her own money, after she hit upon a genius idea. Now, thankfully, I've never had to worry about VPL, but she did, and one night, before she went to a party, she cut off the feet from her pantyhose to get a smooth line under her new trousers. Her hosiery and slimming underwear company took off, and in 2012, she made Time magazine's annual list of the 100 most influential people in the world. She's thought to have a personal fortune of a cool $1 billion. It goes to show that thinking about smalls can generate big business. It's estimated that 80% of startups are funded by the founder, so bootstrapping is a very common way to launch your own business.
Ashiq, we can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Ashiq.
We still can't.
Ashiq, if you plugged in your headphones, at the bottom left, there should be a icon saying mute. There should be like an arrow next to it. So you might have to switch your audio.
Still cannot hear Ashiq. Ashiq, there's an arrow left side bottom corner.
Arrow next to the mic, Ashiq. Then there'll be select microphone and select speaker.
Or just log off and log in.
Ashiq, maybe it comes with your video. If you can turn on your video, even the audio will get connected.
Video is already on.
No, this is the screen that he has shared, not his video. On
Video
the
is
right
already on. We can see him.
Now just put in the code, like the meeting ID. Just yeah, just use the link and come back in. Okay, I'll just tell the guys. Guys, Ashiq left. He'll join back again shortly. Just give it a few seconds.
Okay, camera.
Hi Ashiq, try speaking. Hello. Oh dear. Then you have your administrator password for your laptop. Yeah, I think you'll have to restart your laptop. Like just just reset it and switch it back on again. If that's the case. Yes. Like I remember you saying your laptop's a bit of an old model, yeah? Yeah, let's try one more time. Yeah. Just leave and rejoin. Yeah.
Hello, I just send an screenshot. If you can just see on that, there's a place to like select the mic. You can select on that. Maybe Ashiq needs to select the mic.
Okay, guys, can you all hear me now?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, awesome.
Fantastic. Okay.
Can hear.
Okay, so now I need to share that screen again.
It's not loud enough.
Okay, can you hear me now, guys?
Yeah, that's
Cool.
Yeah, better.
All right. So that has happened. So we were on bootstrapping. Did you all were you able to hear the guy talking about what bootstrapping is about, and did you get the meaning of bootstrapping? Essentially, in summary, means all financial requirements of the org, right, of the organization, of the startup, is done by the founder himself. He brings in, finds ways of doing it. He raises the finances himself. So if you move on to the next slide, right? So the strategies are, in terms of bootstrapping, is it should be, guys, just change this on your slide. It should be buying used instead of new equipment. Okay? Buying used instead of new equipment. So what the founder does is that he does everything himself. So he buys so new equipment might be too costly or too expensive. So he goes ahead and buys used stuff with the finances he has. Leasing instead of buying assets. You lease the asset, you rent it, you rent a space, then buying it. Buying costs a lot, right? Minimizes expenses. Goes to families and friends in terms of funding. Does not go to borrow from financial institutions and have debts to pay. So they avoid all of that, avoiding unnecessary expenses. So the founder himself just gets on with it in terms of raising funds to continue with the business. That's bootstrapping. Is that clear?
Ashiq, the slide says buying new instead of used. It should be other way around, right?
Other way, other buying used instead of new. Change that, guys. Change it. That's wrong.
Okay.
Small typo there. So thank you for being attentive. Huh? So, so that's bootstrapping. Any questions from that, guys? So in your assignment, in your startup, you might use the bootstrapping strategy. I'm not going to borrow any funds that require interest payments. It requires debt repayments. I'm going to, work in ways that I do everything myself. Okay. So in summary, what we did today is that we understood at different stages, at different times in a company's evolution, funding will be required. These funds could be through debt, through equity, or putting your own money, or running it by yourself in terms of bootstrapping. Each of these methods, debt or equity, has its advantages or disadvantages, right? As we know, if you borrow in debt, you have an obligation to repay. Whether the business is successful or not, you have to repay that debt. You need to give collateral. Likewise, in equity, you put the money, and if the business collapses, you lose everything. If it's successful, you gain a hell of a lot, right? So we learned what debt, equity can be used in terms of funding. Also, we learned that at different stages of an organization's evolution, that you'll need funding, and you need to really decide what is the best way, most economical way, and the right way of funding it. It could be debt, equity, it could be a mix of the both. We also learned of crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is becoming a very popular way right now in the Western world in terms of raising funds. Crowdfunding is that you get a large number of investors putting funds into your business. This could be either through debt crowdfunding or equity crowdfunding. And finally, we understood what bootstrapping or financial bootstrapping, where is the entrepreneur himself seeks to balance the funding gap. He does everything himself. That's it. Questions? Any questions or any suggestions? Any thoughts?
One thing on, I think, slide 13 or so, you said when the business is down, the bank is also losing. But isn't that they charge an interest? I think it should be slide 13.
On
where
debt
we
fund?
did that grid. No, where we did that grid.
Yeah. Where we did that grid. Okay, let me go back to that grid. Okay. So
over here it says both sides losers. Isn't bank in a win-win situation anyway?
for bank, it's generally a win. So what the bank, see, the idea here is if the bank lends and the business fails, it becomes a problem for the bank. They may not get everything, no? If you go into bankruptcy and you disclose bankruptcy, bank may not recover everything. They might have the asset that they can get, they take an amount of risk. Do you understand? So meaning to say, okay, to answer your questions, generally the bank does not lose, right? Does not lose. The bank manager lends, but the business fails. If the business fails, the business owner loses. The bank loses in terms of a long-term interest gaining or for that period of time. If it loses, he can't get the future interest until only that point. That's where the bank loses. I hope that clarifies.
Yeah.
Any other questions or any other suggestions, guys?
Ashiq, one more point. When uploading the videos to the Moodle, I think it's good to go as separate files because we can't access them. It won't open.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that, Nadisha. Upload videos as separate files. Oh, okay. All right. If there isn't any further questions, we can close. was this delivery okay for you guys in terms of doing it via Zoom and stuff like that? Was that okay? Anything for me to improve? Other than putting the video. Sorry?
Get a new laptop.
Technical side of it.
Nothing wrong with my laptop, okay? It works fine. All right, guys. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Let's meet next
Ashiq,
Thank
I
you.
hope you will share that
Thank you,
assignment.
Ashiq.
Yeah.